Welcome to Isolation Fest. This is a literary festival that I organised at the start of lockdown. If you know me, unfortunately I had a severe episode of poor mental health, so I had to put this on the back burner. We had over 80 submissions and I'm really proud to showcase them to you today. This is around 2.5 hours long. It's designed for you to dip in and out of. We've got a mixture of writers who are advanced in their careers and writers at the beginning of their careers, and I'm really proud that we have put those side by side and we are showcasing the wide variety of talent. These aren't in any particular order, so if you find that you don't enjoy one set of writing as much as another, there are timestamps in the description which will allow you to go directly to the next writer. The reason that this video is so long and that it will only be available for 2 weeks is that we are looking at mirroring a normal literary festival and the length of time that would run over. So this isn't a permanent video. If you want to watch it, you're going to have to be quick. This has been a real passion project for me. I watched every single submission, I captioned every single one of these videos and I edited these. And it has been a steep learning curve, but I have really enjoyed the process. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the artists for trusting me with their work and for bringing us all some brightness during this very strange time. These submissions were filmed around the beginning of March or April, so some references that the authors make may seem a little odd, and that is why. We begin with the extraordinary poet Katrina Naomi. Katrina has been so supportive of this venture ever since its conception, and I'm really proud to have her featured. I hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name's Katrina Naomi and I'm going to read 6 poems today for the Isolation Fest. Thanks very much, Hannah, for organising it. I'm reading from Penzance, where I live, so it's great to be able to take part in the festival. I'm going to read 2 poems to start off with from The Way the Crocodile Taught Me. This poem is in a sequence about my nan, and this poem is for my mum and my nan. It's called Gin and Ice Cream. Even after all the gins, all morning, you still can't say the C word. Over a weekend, I tried to discuss your daughter, my mum, but your soft blue eyes fill. You ask me to water the roses, stabbing at the crust of a lemon cheesecake, scooping out the last of the ice cream. The petals drip. We won't talk of this again. When Mum comes round, you hug her so tight to the mismatched buttons of your pink housecoat. The air stills. We watch her like royalty, searching her eyes, her movements. We smile hard, draining and weighing each of her words. Edema, tamoxifen, oncologist. Her stay, as always, is brief. After she leaves, I raise a silent toast, and together we finish the bottle. And this is the title poem, The Way the Crocodile Taught Me. I swooned at the large god of him, sunning, a tooth for every day of my life. He performed his run along the bank, as males do. I brought my boat closer. he took to following at a distance. I wasn't taken in, knew his four-chambered heart pumped love out and in and out. Knew his tongue had few good uses, knew all about his grin. Yet whoever said he was cold-blooded has never truly known this beast. He brought out the prehistoric in me. I dived. We swam belly to where the Niles meet. Tussled as we thrashed among the weeds. After, I lay the length of him, a limestone lilo. Studs patterning my skin. He smiled at me, often, taught me all he knew. Years later, when a man tried to drag me under, I practiced the force my lover had held back, levered my small jaws open to their furthest extent, splashed them down on the human's arm. My attacker still carries the mark of my smile. My most recent pamphlet was Typhoon Etiquette, published by Verve Poetry Press, and the poems in here are all from a visit to Japan, where I went for 6 or 7 weeks, and I thought I'd just read the very first poem, which is a really short poem, and the very last poem, which is a longer poem. Okay, the first poem. Today I saw Mount Fuji through a glass wall at the new university. I nearly fell down the clean staircase. It was like seeing the Mona Lisa for the first time, only better. I felt I might cry, or drop my books, or have a stupid expression. And for once, I honestly didn't care. And this poem is what arrival feels like, and it's coming back to Penzance after spending all that time alone in Japan. I had a great time in Japan, but it was that sort of bittersweet feeling, I suppose, of coming back from somewhere you've really loved, but then, and coming home to somewhere you really love. What arrival feels like. Tugging the cold window down, I check myself, worried. I'll feel shy or regretful in some way, unsure if the tears are caused by the rush of night air, the thought of you, or the lights of Penzance, their gaudy echo in the bay, or just my eyes blur after no sleep for 36 hours. The time has gone backwards and forwards. I saw 2 sunsets on an 11-hour flight. Can that be possible? I focus as best I can on the moon, the stars, the end of the land, knowing I can travel no further. I make believe I can see you, way along the platform. After all these weeks, I can. It's you in your green coat from Berlin. I see your black jeans and zebra print shoes, a bunch of anemones in your left hand. Your right reaches mine. As I lean from the train, you hug me as I spill from the journey. Our mouths touch. We say nothing out loud. Now I step back, look at you, properly, my tears wet on your cheek. Our talk on the brief walk home is of aeroplane food, the shop that shut down, a politeness that comes of distance, knowing we'll talk and talk over the next few hours, days and months, and before morning we'll be naked. Then time and the longing will stop, not just in this act, but the moving towards each other, in understanding each other's lives again. And I will learn to give up the sadness, the joy, and the normality of having been alone and not be reluctant. And I've got a new book coming out with Sara on the 1st of June, which is called Wild Persistence. It's the first book I've written since moving to Cornwall, which has been a great thing. So I'm going to read 2 poems. This first poem is a longer poem, and it's for my friend John Searles, who is frightened of birds. The poem is called Maybe Owls. The birds in the silver birches listened as we shone our light over rock, jutting through the moss and grass of the path. The night silenced us. We became aware of the still sky and the stars we were ignorant of. The need for concentration was there, for the cliff fell away to our left. At the bend in the path, the birds took their chance, screeched and flapped at us as if we were intruders, as if we had no right to the dark. You grasped my arm, my hair, as you forced my arm over your shoulder and cowered, an awkward half kneel, the torch beam making an involuntary cross against the woods. I've never known a man make me hug him. For an instant, I considered if this was all a pretence, your ornithophobia. But the birds must have been pleased at their work, for you opened your mouth and screamed. Almost an enjoyment in the pitch of it. And again, that release. I used my in-control voice, steady and slightly stern, which also came of its own volition. I heard my words, considered them and our many selves. Considered again the shelter you took, and how the stars didn't recognise us either. And the night went on, knowingly. Under my command, we walked back faster than we'd come, and you let my arm go, stood apart. And I thought, later, maybe owls, with their whiteness, their bright moon faces, and how quickly the quiet folded the sounds away, blending them into the dark, the night mending itself, the sounds carried by the river and away down the valley. And the last poem is called Boasting Sonnet, and I was commissioned to write this with the idea that for a project called Project Boast, with the idea that women don't tend to boast about their abilities or their achievements. So I had fun writing this. Boasting Sonnet. I'm not one to brag, but Sharon Olds wrote me a poem, me from a council estate. I've done handstands on a skateboard downhill, yet failed both maths and English O-level. I'm still in love with a man I met at 18. I don't believe in marriage, but I once won an award for headbanging and chaired human rights talks at the UN. Expelled from school, I'm now a PhD. I don't wear makeup. This is the real me. Unless I'm doing panto in Cornish. I'm a qualified mountain leader. Wish you could see my scything and Lindy Hop. I'd say much more, but sonnets make you stop. Thanks very much.
Hi, my name's Jenny Danes. I hope that you're all as safe and well as you can be and you're not climbing the walls too much. I've been trying to write a poem every day through all this just to keep myself sane. So I thought I'd start by reading 2 of those lockdown poems. This is called Poem for the Couple Who Do Tai Chi in the Park. Unself-conscious, they carve and lift the air, 2 meters apart, rooted to their chosen patch of earth, their shared silence. The day rearranges itself around their movements, falls back into place with new symmetry. Above them, the joyful noise of house martins and chaffinches. They lean and step in synchrony, and all around them, spring is unable to contain itself. This poem is written after I Woke Up by Jameson Fitzpatrick. Intimate. I lay with my full bladder, feeling the pulsing pain from my one bleeding ovary, and it was intimate, though not quite as intimate as the nurse squirting lubricant onto a probe, pointing to the screen's grey blur and translating it as hemorrhagic cyst. I felt her cold syllables wriggling into my ear canals, and it was intimate. Sometimes intimacy takes the form of sitting indoors with a hot water bottle, spraying my succulents and watching their soil dampen, while picking intimate skin off my intimate running blisters. Just as I know other people's intimate habits include smelling their own fingers and smoothing their greasy bed sheets after an intimate night of intimate sleep. Looking out of the window at someone across the street looking out of their window used to be an intimate act of theft, an infinitesimal scandal of glimpsing each other in the intimate home. But in 2020, this is how we define human intimacy, as separated by an intimate street and by intimate glass, twice. And the next 2 poems are from my pamphlet and were written when I was studying in Germany and in the aftermath of coming back to the UK. This one is called Kiwis. When we're apart again, I find myself eating the things he fed me. Salami, cheese, bread, apples, kiwis, so many kiwis. He bought us a whole carton, all of them rock hard still, but we ate them anyway, peeled them with knives. His ridiculous care not to waste the flesh, almost tender with his blade, coring out the little white nub at the end. We feasted on them like peaches, cupped the bare, wet flesh, the sharpness and the seeds and the juice, sudden in our mouths, the joy of it. At home, I sit a packet of 6 kiwis on my desk and think of him. They're too ripe to eat this way. I have to cut them in half and scoop them empty with a teaspoon. So much sadder, more mechanical, the process of start to finish. Is it the place, the lack of his kitchen table, the breadth and freshness from Italian daylight, of him setting a fruit down at my place, us sitting comfortably quiet, knives scraping, careful as woodwork. Things I left in Germany. 2 pillows, shoes I never wore, a bath mat, a frying pan, a blue pot on the bathroom shelf with an anchor printed on it, 3 broken slats on the bed and superglue stains, also coat hangers, drawing pins, washing up liquid, my boyfriend, the next hour of time, a broken office chair, vacuum bags, a thicker skin, my signature, the hob cleaner than when I first moved in, a few spare euros and a nostalgia for England, a language I'll slowly forget, the bravest part of myself. My grandpa at 91 spends his days humming. I hear it through the door as Gran hangs my coat up and ushers me in. The whole afternoon he sits, pale and absent behind a book, and I reimagine his tuneless moan as water, a steady trickle from him, filling the room inch by inch, tide marks on the wall. I try to speak to him, and the words hover and fade in the damp air, the muffled sound of my voice causing him to stop a moment, the new quiet, my Gran's relief, and then the inevitable return, the shudder of a dam before it succumbs to the weight of water, the tap's incessant drip. I'm going to end with a praise poem because I don't really like finishing on sadder poems like that. So this is called A Hymn for the Cyclists. How smoothly we fill the red box, pulling up one by one, spanning the entire width of predatory headlights. I watch our rear lights blinking out of time, our varying high-vis gear, the dedicated who stretch garish yellow over rucksacks and helmets, the blasé who wear no helmet at all. Eyes front, we wait for our signal, and I wonder if it's just me feeling this tribal affection. These are my people now, all our dominant feet poised on a pedal, all our soft bodies so boldly on the road. The light goes green and we push off hard, and oh, the sweeping choreography as we filter back to single file. Thank you.
This first poem I'm going to read was inspired by a very short-lived career in waste management, a part-time job I had working in a scrapyard, and it's called Derek. I think of Derek, briefly my tireless workmate at Pearson's Waste and Recycling Centre. How he'd be up and down that yard all day with the broom he resembled, with his tash and bony frame. Giant bunch of banana hands wrapped round it like a lolly stick. How once, talking of my plans for university, he mentioned the documentaries he'd watched, the building of the pyramids, Nelson's Navy, a glimpse of himself like copper amid the scrap. That was the first poem I had published a few years ago in Lighthouse Literary Journal, and it's quite similar in terms of subject matter to a certain extent with the last poem I had published, which was last year. I was very fortunate to be published in Magma last year in their issue focusing on work, and this was inspired appropriately enough, by a history documentary about the female workers of the Vickers Armstrong factory in Broughton during the Second World War, who were on a production line building the Wellington aircraft. This is called Building the Wellington. Marge, their supervisor, was hard but fair. They remember she drank pints, was the first of us in trousers, how she'd bang on the toilet door should they run over their 6 minutes. Just time before a dance to dip a comb in the twice flushed water. An emergency measure in place of a set. Then back on the line next morning in pink chiffon, stitching the fabric stretched wingtip to wingtip, the wimpy taking shape, coated with dope. Forever after, all brought back by the smell of pear drops or nail varnish. Okay, I'm going to read now a poem that kind of records a moment in time, I suppose, which occurred quite a few years ago. Now my children are now 10 and 12, and this was written when they were a lot younger, and records a moment spent with them and in the company of my own father. This is called Alakazam. The way my father rolls it round in the palm of his right hand, you'd swear blind it was there, like gravity or love. A ball which he tosses up once, twice, as if readying a fairground lob at the coconuts. From the sofa, I trace its arc through the air into the brown paper bag held pinched in his left. My boys cracking up on the living room carpet. 20-odd years gone before my eyes. Okay, so this was written a little while after that last poem, but covers similar territory. This is called Boy. My acorn pocketer, wind chime tinkler. Like magnets they draw you as we dawdle among the headstones. Slabs of ice, a haphazard mosaic, from the butt that fills the vases of browning graveside flowers. Inside, yellow petals might be flies trapped in amber. You hold them to the light, gasp like Midas, then laugh as we smash and scatter them across the tarmac, each one leaving a tiny hill of sherbet to dissolve behind us in the rain. Okay, I'm going to read now a very short poem which was written after being fortunate enough to see at very close quarters someone playing the harp, and this is simply called Harpist. More animal than angel, that look in his eye. Kestrel, say. The way hunched forward on the small wooden stool. He might have caught sight of something far beyond our vision, suddenly borne up by those flurrying, horn-hard fingers.
the oldest and the saddest in the world. And oh, my keen amigo, at our breaking, borders crowded, Dan overspilt, cleaving darkly on heaven's waters, which are most certainly made of tears, and awash with sturgeons, perhaps the oldest and saddest sturgeons in that world. We begin to listen to those suspect channels, which diagnose our synchronic state and thin singer, this moment, what source? A point of swinging faith, the chastity of many leopards, grandiose, superstitious, and so casually touched by Jesus's black fingertips, glowing and reminiscent of chronic disease. They slick themselves on the golden hieroglyphs, and oh, my pallid sailor, we know that to watch them in their deep and secret play is entirely to be an onlooker upon our own most hidden shames. How beautiful it is, welling in this parasocial love, to witness real affection among beasts, so unobscured by hunger. Thank you. That's probably one of the first animal poems I've wrote that actually became part of a series of animal poems. And I have a particular interest in the sturgeon, the oldest and saddest in the world, apparently, who keep on popping up. These are all poems from my new pamphlet, Caviar, which is coming out with Outspoken Press in 2020. The next poem I'm going to read is called Movement in the Fashion of a Magnet, and it was first in Poetry London. Movement in the Fashion of a Magnet. An EKG of a leaf eating a leaf quietly pulses through my red-blue leafy dress at least 4 times. A manuscript quiring at the sleeves or libidinal velvet brushed quietly back by the hand-me-not of someone else's hand, like the Thames waves retranslating into static in the wind, all part of the video game starscape of my analyst oriental carpet, over which I pull an extremely heavy, dizzying magnet across the sewage of patterns in search of unpolluted charging line. To become an alchemist, wringing algebraic answers from geometry, a seeming trick towards vision against all ornamentation. So why, so hard, to turn this magnet on the chorus, uninfectious and persuasive, many braided voices like clasping hands then beating hands, is a family photograph, and after a family photograph, with their refrain, from touch, from verse, damn these prionic folding repetitions, acting as membrane and registering as shame. The poem that I'm going to read is called The Garden of Love Sleep, which is actually a movement in Messiaen's Turangalila, which is an amazing symphony. And I think more than actually the music itself, the symphony names, which is In the Garden of Love Sleep and Joy of the Blood of the Stars, as poetic phrases stuck in my mind. So this is The Garden of Love Sleep. Dinner is poured, then his hand on mine. Instead of sensation, I receive the dream of 2 green peacocks, pouring smooth grails of touch, each across the other, necks arched in extravagant, romantic love. Insomnia swells a congealing city, congest each head with phrases. A horse called Oris or Just Birdie, a wine press named War on Earth, those hot contour contraptions from the Antchian French regime. Awake, who is with me? Who will unhook the colors ruffles from sunrise each by each? When we talk about manifestos, I feel white doves sprung from a magician's sleeves on sleeves release in this state and in this event. On open caboose, on train of La Vivostock, mosquitoes are breeding quickly in the dark. Clouds' petticoats uncross, cross again, flashing the sun from which we cannot hide, which catches us spoiled and sticky like love's Sunday. The emperor's clothes are very beautiful, and they are very real. I remember them like the song that climbs back to me in snatches, harboring the antiseptic beauty, harpooning the August moon, haranguing the something, something, something noon. Have we slept? I've found us flabbergastly, clean and glamorous like the courtesan, who appears here and all other places in a new state, age, dress, civility, having forgot the crashing sound of a beating door, the stench of the night closing in and darkening, oh, carrion. At last, something beautiful arrives, the equal weighted phrase that leaves your mouth and the sky at the same time. The next poem I'm going to read is a sonnet, which is always quite fun to write. It's called The Shouts. Somewhere, of course, someone is dancing. No, no, not us. Door handles bark and women seem like babies. Moon. We hopscotch through prognosticating streetlights, light in their pockets, drunk and sad. The shouts prism into snakes of light and snakes on snakes and light again. One day, I'll kiss your golden face in meadows green, and happy, be so happy. Drunk's autograph, its moon, is too exposed. He signed an affidavit, carrying its Kevlar to the door. Christ, this is so painful, Sam. Now, do we dream? What can we do? We eat the saddest food and hunt only when we are so hungry. My final poem is called To You with a Guitar, and it was after I saw a classical guitarist called Sean Sheeb perform a rendition of a song that was originally meant for, I think, 18 bagpipes, so it was very loud. And this is about the experience of such loud classical electric guitar. To You with a Guitar. Guitar uncrinkling any sound, the cough, the ruff of papers in that lady's bag as she shifts. Of course, I worry about the hazards of breathing in so much noise. What can you do but hope that it will scrape you clean? Let it in, a rod threaded with cloth, jabbing up a flute's nose. To another poet, even you, living inside this sterile throb could be like living under God. God, I agree. I want it to last forever. The future mistakes and yawns. A word, a woman hit, a nuclear bomb. The messenger will suffer well, make no mistake. I am checking in. You have ghost-written this poem from 10 years in the future, and you have ruined my life.
Hello, I'm Joanna Lilley, and I'm talking to you from Whitehorse in the Yukon, which is where I've lived for the last 14 years. You can probably tell from my accent. I'm probably not from the Yukon in Canada. I moved from the UK, as I say, 14 years ago, and I've lived here ever since, and I still love the winters. I know that's very hard to believe. I still feel a bit sad when the snow starts to melt, which it's doing pretty much about now, but very slowly, because we had lots and lots of snow this year, which has been wonderful. So I'm going to read some poems from my very new poetry book. It's called Endlings, and it's published by Turnstone Press in Canada, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And it's all about extinction, and most of the poems are about specific species, but only about half of the poems are about animals that were definitely made extinct because of human activities. So it's not just a rant against human beings, it's also got poems about animals that became extinct more naturally, you might say, through one of the 5 mass extinctions that the Earth has experienced before humans came along, and of course we're now in the 6th mass extinction, which is very much our fault. So, the first poem I'm going to read, it's about the Javan tiger. Now, the Javan tiger was listed as extinct in 2003, and people still think that they see it, but it's probably just wishful thinking, unfortunately. So, the Javan tiger is, of course, from Java, Indonesia, and this poem is called Beauty. There's a rumour about beauty, its long whiskers and golden eyes, its stripes as dark as the moon shadows of trees. There's a rumour that the forest took the beauty, that the people who took the forest took the beauty's stripes tightened, sliced right through. The people said they had nothing to do with it. The whiskers caught fire, and the golden eyes burned right through. And of course, I wrote that poem, it sort of came out in one flow, which sometimes happens, not very often. I did, of course, work on it a fair bit afterwards, but the poem itself kind of seemed to come in one go. And then I realised after that, of course, it's some kind of conversation, you might say, with William Blake's poem Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright in the Forest of the Night. And I didn't realise that when I was writing it. So it's just interesting how poems evolve somehow, and you realise things much, much later. So the next poem is about probably the most famous extinct animal ever, the dodo. And this poem, so the dodo was hunted by sailors, killed off by invasive species, all again, unfortunately, because of human activity. And the dodo was pretty amazing, and it was bigger than I realised. I sort of had this idea that it was a lot smaller, but it was actually about 1 metre high. So a big, big bird with this big, fantastic beak and powerful knees. So this poem is called The Flightless Bird of Mauritius. No, I have nothing to say. No need. Everyone knows me. There is no requirement to register, remark, on what is already recorded. By all means, stare instead at the over-middened moa, my Antipodean protector, or the ivory-billed woodpecker, full-feathered forest dweller. What? Did you say there was a tree named after me? I would point out, perhaps, as you are looking, that this is not all actually me. I am bits of others. A borrowed carpal, vertebral rib, an ersatz ulnar. My maxilla and mandible are mine, my patelli, left and right. I wouldn't be myself without my kneecaps. There's no mention of the size of my kneecaps, how I ran over rocks and roots, across the palm savanna into ebony shade. Such injustice. Necrotic silence. You like your lie that I was clumsy, plump, and bumbled into nullity. If I were asked, thank you, I would only say there is no air here. Just dust. This itching skullcap proving familiarity's neglect. And I cannot digest. I cannot form flesh to cover this ghastly cage. I need my gizzard stones. No one thought to pick those out of the mud on my hot island when they dug up my bones. You are not the only ones who need tools, who, without them, would be as obliterated as me. So the next poem I'm going to read is about the quagga. Now this is another wonderful creature that I discovered when I was researching this whole project to write a whole book of poems just about extinct animals. The quagga was half zebra, half horse, and it was again hunted heavily after the Dutch settled in South Africa in the 1600s, and the Dutch actually wanted the land that the quaggas were on for their own sheep and goats and grazing of their own livestock. So again, they took away this beautiful creature's habitat, and this wonderful animal became very popular, as you can imagine, because it was quite a spectacle. So this poem is called Nothing Can Be Done. Send more quaggas, the Amsterdam Zoo said. Make meat and leather, the farmers and settlers said. Bring us the quaggas, the Victorians urged. Zebra horses look splendid pulling our carriages. Let the stallion at London Zoo rage and bash himself to death. Nothing can be done. Quaggas are highly strung. Photograph the London mare. It's easy now she's always still. Send more quaggas, the Amsterdam Zoo said. Nobody knew the last one was dead. So I'm going to read a poem about a very beautiful creature. It was like an antelope. It's called the booble hartebeest. And again, this animal that lived north-south of the Sahara, so another African creature, was massacred in great numbers by the French when they invaded Algeria. And the last one probably went extinct in the 1920s. The last one was shot in Morocco in 1925, and then they had probably disappeared from Algeria around the same time. And it did eventually get protected, but it was too late in 1933. They had all gone. So this poem is going to be much shorter than the long introduction I have just given it. This poem is called I Hold Up My Hands. Wrists together, palms open, angled, fingers lifted to make the shape of horns, a flower, now swiftly a chalice. You pour into the space I hold. I carry the air of you, the nothing you have become. My fingertips tickle with the scented recollection of high savanna grass. So I think one more poem, and as I say, I've also written quite a lot of poems in this book about animals that became extinct, not necessarily because of human activity. I wanted to kind of find them and put their voices somehow on the page, which I know, of course, is impossible, but it was a great sort of privilege trying to do this. So I'm going to read a poem about the Beringian lion that lived where I am, up in the Yukon and in the circumpolar world, and a huge creature, much like a lion that we know now, but much bigger. And I also like this poem because it's got my cat in it as well. This is called Garden Lion. I lift the findings warily from foam that mimics snow. Panthera leo bones, a cold and heavy as stone. In this laboratory, I'm allowed to touch, grease fossils with my fingers, wear minerals away as steadily as any of my species. It's -30 through the prefab wall where human prides are idling, exhaust clouds rising slowly to a sundog. At home, I hoist the cat to my left clavicle, stand on the back porch, our white breath merging. He jumps and runs to snow. Soft, shaggy gold, he stops and twists to bite bald ice from between his toes. The lower left canine in his mandible tugging as his second metatarsal stretches and the fifth metacarpal keeps his balance. Thank you very much.
name's Loren Cafferty, and I've entered 2 pieces of flash fiction into Isolation Fest. The first is called Heading Out. I can remember the way the world once looked. Truthfully, I know that memory is only the way that my world once looked. I don't know how many of us remain, those left behind, those who chose to stay behind, life after the great rewild. We had watched the world burn, metaphorically and literally, and the world took action. Political summits, treaties, governments rising and falling like great tsunamis, ideologies that swept away the old but left a flood of destructive mess. Eventually, remarkably, there was a sort of consensus. Some disagreed. Those who wanted to eat meat and engage with technology were given the chance to leave, to move to the old dependencies. I sometimes wonder about those people, my brother amongst them. Did they survive? Are they thriving? Did the apocalyptic warnings come true? As I look around now, our regimented lives, the bulk of the country, a running wilderness of trees, weeds and beasts. I wonder if this is survival, if this is life. Is this what we were promised? There's always work to be done. The regulation pods are flimsy, and although we are promised that the weather will settle down, it seems unlikely in my lifetime. The bending sickle sides are often battered by storms and need repair. I can remember how the media gave storms names, old-fashioned and comforting, as if they were long-lost friends. We don't have time for such things now, and the few media companies that survived the purge of leisure are underground now. There are a dwindling number of us who were part of the days when streets, grey rivers of commuters outnumbered green spaces. The Green Belt, it was called, as if it were a place on the margins, used for punishment. Or perhaps that's only how I feel now, when those in charge have ensured that it's not just belt but braces too. The world is clothed entirely in green now. I have heard that there are groups starting to settle in larger groups, heading for the place that was once called Scotland. Not that they call it that. The old names are forbidden. Ghosts of recollection whispered into the lines and swirls of willing ears. You see other people so infrequently, it's increasingly hard to know who they might be. The Green Watch, just checking, or a true zealot of nature first, wanting to share seeds or stories of the latest city to be officially reclaimed. You try to stare into the souls of the quiet ones, to ascertain if it's safe to talk, to strike a cautious note of dissent. A need to find out. I will take little. My knife, the regulation portable billy can, and a blanket. I won't be able to carry much, and I need to be able to move swiftly and quietly, a greater chance to avoid the wolves that roam the true North Country. The decision is made, though. I'm heading out. Okay, on my second piece, another piece of flash fiction is called After the Impact. There was stillness, a long moment of nothing. Nobody was moving. Time was disjointed out of itself. Then the noise began, a discordant crescendo, sobbing, shouting, crying out. Some were hollering for help. Sara was dimly aware that her face felt strange, one side burning as if she'd been slapped, and the other without sensation. She raised her hands like Frankenstein's monster in his first moments and felt the thick, wet surface, looked at her fingers, soaked cherry red. Only streets away, The radio crackled. Information filtered into the cab and the sound died again. Charlotte reached, put the ambulance into gear. People had begun to move down the aisle, brushing Sarah's body. Pain flashed through her and she flinched away into the space beside her. She realised the gap, the absence of being where previously there had been a boy. Her brain, addled by shock and alcohol, tried and failed to process. As they parked, even in the darkness of the early morning, lit only by a few streetlights and the endless scroll of red, amber, green controlling nothing, it was clear to Charlotte that the collision was significant. The front of the bus was concertinaed. The lorry had swerved, was skewered at an odd angle. There was a voice on the deck below Sarah, loud, male, telling people not to panic, that it would be okay, to get off. The police were already there. There was the usual series of greetings and hurried conversations. The bus was full of students, the lorry driver shocked, the bus driver hysterical. There was the potential for up to 50 casualties. Then the officer had given an indicative nod. Sarah stood and waited her turn to file downstairs, noticed the window. The upstairs windscreen was smashed, a huge hole in the middle, while shattered glass radiated out like the sketch of a cartoon star. She wondered if the bus had hit a tree or a bird. And she slipped through the crumpled doors. She stumbled, eyes riveted to the dreadful truth. Lying on the road, about 15 feet away. We think, dead on impact. Certainly travelled along the tarmac, lost most of his face, said the police officer grimly. One of your lot will need to take him. We're going to get these kids off. She recognised his trousers, a ridiculous yellow. Even in the September darkness, Sarah could see the seeping tide mark around his entire body like a shadow. And Charlotte sighed. She knew from bitter experience that most of the students on the bus would be frightened or angry or hysterical, and that their fear or anger or hysteria would be heightened by drink. She felt in her pockets for gloves and smiled at the next girl who stepped through the gap where the bus doors had been wrenched open. And Sarah felt an arm around her, warm but insistent, leading her into the back of an ambulance.
My first poem does not have a title, but hey ho. I'm sat in the garden, not doing much, finding comfort in my fluffy pyjamas as they protect me from the breeze sent to dredge the remnants of winter. Though the sun woke my side of the earth hours ago, the start of my day was marked by a quick prayer and a smear of toothpaste left on my cheek. Today, I think about my youth. And I know I'm still young, but that doesn't make me immune to the wish of being younger. It's that sweet, sweet feeling of nostalgia we crave, I swear. Big Pharma are gonna shove it in a pill one day, but I digress. The current agenda is reminiscing about my youth. So I sit in my garden and think of the endless fun I used to have here, when stranger danger was the only thing that stopped me venturing beyond my patio. The four walls of my mind stood no chance against fantasies of superpowers, being a mermaid, and endless bowls of spaghetti. I was going to continue this poem by asking where my imagination went, and wondering if I'd locked it away with fond memories of fleeting crushes decorated with coloured barrettes, but I don't want to think like that. One's imagination is not lost that easily. It's a marvellous, resilient little thing. So with my time, I'm going to get reacquainted with it. Soon, words on a page won't be enough to contain it. And I want to revel in every single drop that escapes through the seams. When the dam breaks, I'll be stood, arms wide, ready. So that's the first poem. My second poem is titled Fat Girl Walking. Fat girl walking, make way. Her nonchalance may suffocate you. Fat girl plodding, take cover. Her hips may put you in your place. Fat girl stomping, protect yourself, 'cause she's on her way to an afternoon snack. You can gawk, you can stare. She won't care. She's earned it. Because she rejoined the world today. Watching seasons pass through her window was no longer enough. She had to experience lavender's seductive scent, seek safety in a bottomless pool when he attacked, two-step with enchanted leaves and be cut by crisp winds sent to warn of incoming snowfall. Fear made her a captive in her own home. She thought it was there to help. It reminded her of how often you changed her name to that of a monster. It convinced her alone is best. It held her in a vice and called it a hug. Every time, her window shrank, and every time, she thanked it. But today, she didn't remember the names. She remembered reconnecting with friends. She cried watching Bambi, not at her reflection. Her belly was no longer an adversary. Her civil war had been won. The mind reclaimed as a hub for peace, and the treacherous fiends banished. The beauty of her queendom restored. Flowers no longer afraid to bloom, the sunrise no longer suppressed. She can look after herself now. But regardless of how her body changes, she will always remember her fat girl roots. She will look back in pride because she learnt there is beauty in a fat girl. And she'll use her newfound freedom to make sure everyone else knows it too. That was the second poem. The third one, again, is untitled. In God she trusts, her only confidant. Lovers tangle themselves in her silk legs, but cannot bring comfort the way her God does, for they do not see the chains that bind her feet. She speaks in tongues, so they will not know she is tainted. Not like her family, painted in disdain, or friends drenched in hypocrisy. Her illness is that of an outcast. She is no child of Eve. The Lord did not give her original sin. Instead, she is burdened by herself. In her Bible, she leaves notes, inconceivable to man, but known by Almighty. His omniscience gives her hope. He knows of Lucifer's infestation, how he slipped in through her dreams, and he knows how to drag him out. So she keeps faith, waiting for her promised land to come, and on that day she may share her church with those capable of conversion, who show understanding. Until then, it remains quiet as her murmured prayers and soft hymns drift over empty pews. Now, my final poem is titled Things to Do When You're Bored. Things to do when you're bored. Google what to do when you're bored. Read articles describing the same uninspired activities intended to distract you from the mundaneness of your situation. Watch a movie on Netflix. Cancel your current free trial and search for another debit card so you can claim your 6th free trial. Pat yourself on the back for cheating the system and wonder how Netflix haven't found a way to stop this kind of thing happening. Vow to learn a new language. Realize Rosetta Stone is expensive. Be too scared of the Duolingo owl to consider re-downloading the app. Convince yourself your GCSE in French would be enough to survive in Paris. Watch another movie. Then another. Then that series you've been putting off. Wonder how 12 hours can pass so quickly. Sing a song. Perform for your adoring fans, e.g. stuffed animals. Fantasize about marrying your favorite celebrity. Think about the cute puppies or babies you'd have. Sniff the bin in an attempt to locate the foul smell that's plaguing you. Realize you haven't showered in 3 days. Have a shower. Use it as an opportunity to practice your responses to situations that probably won't happen. Remember the thing you should have said in that one dumb argument you had 4 years ago. Call a friend. Tell them how bored you are. Then debate about which one of you is more bored. Thank them for brightening your day. Tell them you love them. Call everyone you care about and let them know you love and miss them. Attempt a handstand. Realize this isn't a good time to end up in A&E. Sit by a window. Listen to the birds. Appreciate the sun. Remember, everything will be okay. That you've survived worse things. Breathe in. Breathe out. Google what to do when you're bored again and hope someone has come up with some new ideas.
Community commute. Train rumbles back into life. Tin can bodies readjust to lean into each other more gently. United in their delayed morning commute, grumbles soft with sleep. Off the train, the little girl is bursting, crossing her legs, blowing pufferfish cheeks. But her mum finds pennies, and no 20 pence. Nonplussed, a businessman holds out the coin, sailing the ticket barrier with an elderly passenger's bags. It's a big city to fill, to save with selflessness, battling pay cuts and tears. But in snatched moments, I watch kindness, and it is enough to hold us together. Now, commuting is something no one's doing at the moment to avoid the disease, of course. Something we're also not doing is travelling. So my next poem is called Florence Tourist, and ironically about a crowd. Quilt work faces collide. We witness. Feel stomach swelling, toasting. Square stuffed with selfie sticks. There a man lies supine, painting film, her slow motion street dance, flashing backdrop of cathedral. Brash voices shoot code, new language of Google Maps. Hands navigate bars to golden doors. Future worship flickers on Facebook. As night pales to calls, distinctly English, we wonder where locals hide from storming feet. The next poem that I would like to read is called Language. I'm attempting to learn Spanish, but I'm awful at Italian. My partner's family is Italian, so this is a little bit about me struggling at family meals. Lost in translation. Dinner table tongue sits heavy for a word, a light. Aimless smile wishes on a trick to penetrate this dialect. Como la comida que I reject on home turf. Avoid making a fuss, labelling my mute mouth picky. It's pretty enough for an impression these days. I'll be better next year. But the lovely thing, of course, about travelling is that we get a bit of vitamin D on our face, the sun that doesn't really exist in this country, which seems to exist every day in Italy. It's probably my imagination. But this poem is called Breakfast is an Important Part of the Afternoon. Wilting in the shimmer sheen of a small Italian town. Hot tongues in hot milk, we sip the morning down. The sky toasts. Almost hidden, half moon bites ladder my legs. Thirsty creature punctures rude polka dots. Mark my skin foreign. You lay a soothing hand on the ripening sores. Another thing about going abroad is that mosquitoes love pale skin. And now my next poem, and a lot of what this collection touches on, is growing up and the space between being a teenager or a child adult and when do you become an adult. And one of those things is, of course, getting a job, 9 to 5. So this one touches on that. It's called Sometimes I Feel So Alive With You, I Can't Breathe. Can you hear the pennies? It will define us. Tell me, are you anxious? My ergonomically adjusted chair brings me productivity. It allows for weakness. You broke your back for the spreadsheet. There are other ways, I say. Numbers bleeding from your ears. There is an end goal. But if you found it, would you know? We're sitting heavy. Meters of intestinal tract unravelling. Pound is a weary art. It will define us. Searching for words, pot of gold numbers. Tell me, are you anxious? Now, the reason I started writing poetry, well, sharing it anyway, was because of my grandma, who sadly passed away before I started publishing my own poetry and performing it. And so this next poem is a celebration of her and the way that she wanted to leave the world. And she was a Buddhist, so there is like a certain calm way that she approached death and that she accepted it. It's called Silver Birch. The leaf of you grew around my waist. When you turned to dust, I fell to the earth. Cold seeped through. I want to be buried under a tree, you said to deaf ears. I buried the thought until I buried your body. The silver birch is frail, like you. But when sun peaks, splatters its leaves, it is a celebration of colour, the tongues of leaves chattering near my ears. It wasn't easy to process the loss of my grandma. Unfortunately, it was an accident, and it happened very quickly. So this next poem touches on that, and it's called Afterlife. Death ended my membership of the Catholic Church. I spent 3 years of university setting an alarm for services never attended. 1 year on, I step through the doors, weep for my faith. I think as I started navigating that space and working full time, I think while mental health is of focus at the moment. Perhaps it's still not quite there in workspaces. So this one touches on that. Spaces. Adult spaces. Work white lies. Air thin. Whispers. I take up too much space. Apologetic. Crying in cubicles quietly. Such a nuisance. Fine. White lies. Too small to breathe. Too much space to put my limbs in the silence of what I cannot say. And the next poem is quite experimental in the way that I've set it out. Let's check that, if you can see. It's called Squeamish. I hate needles, I hate knives, I hate blood, and it explores the multiple different ways that I would have nightmares about with blood. She leans over the knife. The point glints, grins, gulps. Power cuts veins, courage. Trembles away from its eye. It watches, tastes her fear. Muddy, polluted blood, sanitized from her open vein, tackles the vial from her peripheral, wary of its bile. She shows her again. Push point through thigh. The click indicates full immersion. The needle measure 2/3 of her thigh. Sealed. It sits opposite at the table. A reminder. Under pressure, she imagines her bones seeping through her skin and rising like hot water balloons. If she lets it, her brain will uncurl like meters and meters of tired rope. Thank you. So Growing Pains is available through me or Indigo Dreams. It's £6. It's been a pleasure to read for you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name's Liz and I'm a poet and performer from Manchester. Travel log. This is one that's hopefully to some degree relatable to people. I think we probably had our fair share of travel log memories. The room was Arctic cold, so I toddled down in the hope they'd fix the aircon. No joy, they just gave me soap. Back up to my phone and to you, and you told me of a wolf and swore me to silence. I just really wanted to tell my mum, but instead I told you I loved you, and you didn't respond for a long time, and I lay between white sheets in that cold, cold bed so big. I was used to my narrow one in our ancient digs. You had been so close to me that day, both of us in London. Flight paths crossing at different heights so we didn't meet. Your coach, my train and feet. We lived months under one roof in Manchester, but I guess it took distance for me to tell you, and you to say no, and I was shaking and crying. But the next day in the city, I found this woman kind of pretty, and I didn't fight it because I wasn't yours forever anymore. And when I got home, you were blonde, and it was all different. Before we were us. The past version of me was a vast rabbit warren, whose rabbit left one night, and I was all filled up with wild garlic, flowering soft and sad and white in my chambers. The past version of you was sunshine and bees, I believe, though I never met her, you, before you changed, and I pray you always were this way, like pineapple. Before we were us, we were larger, like Neptune, me, and Jupiter, you. I lost so much with my massive blue, but you stayed radiant and golden for every phase, and maybe it's okay. In my dreams you take me down to Darley's Lake, and it is real, the paintings where swans and elephants are one and the same, only water between, and how you choose to see.
If I die, I do not want to be remembered as thinness, as smoke and ink. I want to be stuffed with berries, be your arching umbrella, a moon that was waxing when it fell. Honey Rose and Sea Jasmine. I have my 2 fancy baby names all lined up. I'm really quite chuffed. I'm ready for you, my girl. One name is after someone I know, let's say Honey Rose. The other is after someone I knew, let's say Sea Jasmine. Aren't they cute? Honey Rose seems the way to go, right? Yes, today she made me cry. But she chose me, she gave me all I needed. Sweet warmth, a stable arm, a mother's kind of attention. She is rich and would be fun for you, I know. But nights like this, my cheeks red raw. I think, Sea Jasmine, you would have loss, but stories. A whisper of a woman long ago, who made fires, who knew the tides, who will never have the chance to ever come back, to dirty your name, or hurt me. When love is curry. Love is a wooden tray with silver foil prized up to find your rare golden lunch, all hot and sweet. Love is the smell of butternut squash in the steam. Love is pulling off your big green oven gloves that your mother gave you, cleaning off a plate from the stack in the sink, serving yourself riches. Love is finding chickpeas and a surprising hit of spice thinking, God, from frozen in the oven is so much more than from chilled in a microwave. Love is this feeling that you deserve this meal, that you can cook for yourself if only from a box. It is like being a child again, with no fear. Love is not negotiating her every mood and whim, crying and crying until your cheeks crack pink, waiting for her to pick up, see how thin you've got. Love is so clear in this moment. It is only this. Seeing a woman in a jumper in a cold flat, you, and feeding her curry, followed by chocolate and raspberries. Blood gargle. When I first moved to France, pride and hope in my blood, I swore I would pluck up the courage to give blood. But born at the end of the mad cow disease years, I found myself blacklisted. France did not want my blood. I regret that I may have backed out anyway. As my friends will tell you, I'm not good with blood. The first time a nurse drew my blood out of me for testing, I fainted, all that cube of my blood. From meat I'd just come, and meat I'd just been, and I knew in a moment by some bulk at their blood. It was different each month, it was meant to flow then, I was told, and I would be intrigued by my blood. When it crept from a wound, from a fault, my mistake, was when I felt guilty, mocked and blamed by my blood. I never discovered my blood type, I want to. It would soothe me to know that bit more of my blood. I should learn not to picture a wild sea of red, but the neat little discs and the orbs in my blood. The feel of my pulse in my wrist makes me nauseous. I find fear in the force and the throb of my blood. But think just how hard the heart and brain battle to safeguard from silence that bass drumbeat of blood. The waves go on crashing, the world goes on spinning, and I wish that I could give that gift, give my blood. This is a poem about moving back to Manchester, having lived in all kinds of places. Arrival. Once a little fish swam across a wide, warm sea, until it sighted a big island with a beehive bright and pretty. The fish longed to stay there, to explore this honeyed city, so it flopped out of the water and it dressed up as a bee. It came to love the colours, the sweetness and the buzzing, and it knew that it belonged there, for what it lacked in history, it made up with its wisdom from the ocean and the mystery, and when it felt alone in its mind the waves were hushing. Over time the fish grew braver, let its silver scales start shining to form a new mosaic with its black and golden fur, and daring to believe it could be true to both its worlds, the new critter relaxed, spread its wings and started climbing. There was still some doubt there though, till the night when you told me, "But you're a Mancunian," so casually and so free.
Hi, my name is Elspeth Wilson, and I'm going to be reading from a piece of life writing called Saltwater that was originally published in Token magazine, an amazing magazine for underrepresented writers, last year in their winter issue. This is a piece of life writing about my life and about trauma in my life, so I just want to give a content warning at the start that there is mention of sexual assault, although there is no graphic detail at any stage, and also, just another content warning for general discussion of trauma. So, saltwater. The waves that are just visible from our top floor bedroom window mimic my body on its bad days. They jerk in a monotony of inky breakers frosted with white spray. My limbs copy their spasms as I experience non-epileptic seizures as a result of PTSD several times a week. On days when the waves are calm and it is hot, I feel stiller too, but inevitably in Ireland this can't be counted on. I need something else to quell the roaring tides in my mind. Like so many others, I turn to the internet to search for my salvation, and in a way, I find it there. An article about how to practice self-care after an assault tells me that a bath is a good idea to reconnect with your body. I don't have a bath in my grotty flat, but I do have the sea a 5-minute walk away, so I take that as the next best thing. Up until this point in my life, the sea has been ever-present but overlooked. In Scotland, I grew up next to it, could see it from my bedroom window, drove past it all the time, but I rarely swam. I didn't like that it was cold, unknowable, demanding of my courage. If I interacted with it at all, it was to paddle or sit on the beach, seeing it as an ornamental backdrop for photos. This pleasantness fell away the moment I lifted the last of my toes off the seabed, ceding my pretense of control, so I stayed firmly rooted to the earth. Only discomfort had awaited in the grey depths of the North Sea. But maybe the point of the sea is not that it's a luxury, but a necessity. Greystones, or na clochaliacha in Irish, which has the same literal meaning, is reachable by the Dublin Area Rapid Transit, or DART as it's more colloquially known, but is outside the capital city in County Wicklow. The bright green DART trains cling to the cliffs of Killiney Bay like the only snakes not driven out of Ireland, having subsequently got fat on the sun. A hurried disposition will despise the DART, but what the trains lack in speed they make up for in the beauty of the breathtaking views from Black Rock all the way out along the coastline. It was at the very end of the line where my new home was situated, a destination for she South Dubliners, day trippers in fleeces, and me with a thesis to write and a past to try and forget. Having moved to a new country where I knew no one, I again found myself living by the sea, an invisible riptide dragging me back to where I was reared. With my body frequently coated in the salt of my tears, I started to notice the waves for the first time. And so, armed with a determination to do something and the first bit of disposable income I had in months, I took myself shopping to buy 4 swimsuits in the summer sales. Some were practical and some worthy of Love Island, but I adored them all. I even love my body on the beach, where toddlers coexist with 80-year-olds and nobody cares if they see a nipple or some pubes, so long as you are making a performative show of trying to cover yourself with a tiny towel. Appearances matter more than appearance. In the most seaworthy of the swimsuits, I was ready. It would be generous to describe the first excursion as a swim. I hauled myself out of the flat and covered the short distance to the beach. A more adventurous friend came with me for my first forays, and while she cut through the water like a friendly knife, I lingered in the shallowest of shallows. Just a few moments ago, we were walking past the ice cream shops and boutiques of the seemingly manicured seaside town, and less than 5 minutes later, I could feel the wild, both internally and externally. It bothered me because I couldn't ignore it, even though I tried my best. I even kept my dress on, hitching it above my pants and going in no further than mid-thigh. The next time, I came alone, without even a purse or a phone. I was too scared to leave them on the beach unattended, and I didn't need anything to add to my nerves. I determined which dresses are easiest to get changed in before and after a swim, and had only one of the select few dresses, a towel and a hoodie on my person. Leaving the house with so few possessions became a routine, one that is almost as freeing as the water itself, with nothing to distract from the sea. Not liking swimming, combined with my wariness of deep water, had inevitably led to not being particularly proficient at it. But as I started to swim more and more frequently until it became a daily or sometimes twice daily ritual, I realised that this didn't matter. In fact, there is freedom in being bad at something one loves. My mind raced all the time I wasn't swimming due to temperament and circumstances. But in the water there was no pressure because I couldn't be good at this even if I tried. And what beauty in doing something that you're mediocre at merely because it is fun, because you enjoy it and it nurtures you. For someone like me whose mind has a tendency to fixate on things, particularly that which can be squeezed into a framework of punishing self-improvement, having a hobby that is not an area for development provide release from self-expectation. It made me question my idea of what is a productive use of my time, and as I allowed my brain to be soothed by sensation rather than thought, my seizures slowly started to ease. At this point in my life, I had no structure other than the sea. I was finishing my degree in gender studies, writing every day about reproductive rights, but my head was getting lost in my passion. The sea reconnected it with the body to which it was attached, reminding it that there are patterns both inside and outside myself. As I was living in Greystones and needed some light relief from feminist theory, I started reading I Found My Tribe by Ruth Fitzmaurice. A resident of the town, Fitzmaurice documents how her and her friends, beset by tragedies and trauma, form a tragic wives' club who swim in Ladies' Cove and Greystones every single day of the year. While I don't think I could ever be as hardy as these women, whom I've never met but came to admire fiercely, I understood the power of the sea to create rhythm out of chaos. A commitment to it is hard to break, but it does not guilt-trip you. It simply demands your innermost self and knows that you will deliver. Parts of myself were touched that had not been touched in a long time by the salty waters in the cove. I had tried the big beach in Greystones a few times but found it daunting, so stuck to the softer, sheltered cove that is slightly further north. It has steps leading down directly into the sea, but I always chose to walk out into it bit by bit, acclimatising each inch of my body to its cold love that grew warmer with every second I dedicated to it. Approaching it this way gave the ocean more time to hold me. I started to comprehend something of the reason why the Tragic Wives Club find themselves saved anew each day, in a body of water that is forgiving in every aspect other than temperature. Now, 1 year on, I've left Greystones with its island meets the Med Feel veggie cafe and the public library with the best sea view that I've ever encountered in my life. But I haven't left the sea. I am still a tourist every time I catch the dart and insist on sitting on the left-hand side out of Tara Street to get the best view of the coast. Unsolicited, I tell other people which side they should sit on too, and then watch smugly as their noses skim the glass as the whole world seems to open up at Black Rock. I have even learnt to love the city beaches and the people on them. Previously a stickler for an unspoilt beach, I now realise that everything is spoilt if your mind is the thing that is spoiling it. There is so much joy to be had in toddlers, retirees and flirting teenagers all gathering with abandon at 5:30 p.m. on the same tiny cove. The shrieks of cold from a Spanish school group sound in my ears as I push out into central Sandy Cove for an after-work swim. My hand touches a jellyfish unexpectedly and I think, what are you doing here, in my ocean? And then I giggle because I still can only manage a subpar breaststroke, so I'm close enough to the shore that I could stand at any moment. But even though I could touch the bottom, I no longer do so. When something unexpected comes along, my body's immediate reaction is no longer to recoil. I say sorry to the jellyfish for grabbing it without meaning to. As I stare out at the blurred silhouettes of the two red and white towers that dominate Dublin Bay, I know that I've found a place that heals me and that is not specific to any one location. Part of the sea is carried within me, and part of it is ready to be discovered again any time I bravely ran into the waves in a slightly too small bikini. My body is finally at home.
I'm going to read some poems for you today from my new book called Grenade Genie. It's published by Fly on the Wall Press. It's available from the publisher and available from myself, and it's going to be available from Amazon and all the usual outlets as well. It's priced £8.99, and it's a book that's split into 4 sections. It's subtitled 25 Brief Studies of the Cursed, Coerced, Combative and Corrupted. And I'm going to read, so it's in those 4 sections: cursed, coerced, combative, corrupted. And I'm going to read a poem from each of those sections. And the first poem I'm going to read from the cursed section is a poem it's about Instagram poetry and a poetry icon, and where I fit in with both. And it is modestly called The Greatest Poem. I've been thinking that if I visit the Nayland Rock Shelter overlooking Margate Sands at the right time in the autumn of 2021, exactly 100 years on from when Thomas Stearns Eliot went there to write his masterpiece, The Wasteland, the greatest poem of the 20th century, then if I sit there long enough with my laptop, maybe I'll end up writing the greatest poem of the 21st century. Things in my favour. My first name is Thomas. I once worked for Lloyd's Bank and I write poetry. Things that might go against me. My surname isn't Eliot, it's McColl. Working for Lloyd's Bank is in itself no indicator of literary talent, and anyway, history doesn't tend to repeat itself. In fact, what if this time round the inverse happens and I end up writing the worst poem of the 21st century? In the current climate, it's highly likely. Let's face it, Thomas Stearns Eliot had advances in psychoanalysis to help him get in the right frame of mind, whereas all I have is advances in social media. Who knows, maybe by 2021 I'll have no choice but to fit my opus into 4 lines on Instagram. But then when I do, my simple artless platitude will inexplicably receive 1 million likes, and then released as part of a book will inexplicably sell 1 million copies, and my poem will be so bad that everyone will definitely remember it much more than whatever the best poem of the 21st century will actually be, written perhaps by someone who, like Eliot, may be going through difficult times, and talented enough to harness adversity, will out of that create a brilliant epic poem. But unfortunately, there will no longer be anyone with the attention span to read it, let alone publish it, and he or she in despair will delete it and give up writing altogether. Whereas I'll go on to publish book after book, and William McGonagall will turn in his grave at no longer being the worst poet in the English language, usurped by Thomas McColl, now famous for having written the worst poem of the 21st century, or indeed any century. But that's the thing, writing the worst ever poem is no barrier anymore to immense success. Thomas Stearns Eliot may well have been the best, but there's no room for that now. Now it has to be 4 lines or less and totally trite. 1921, been and gone. 2021, bring it on. Thank you. Right, and then from the next section, which is coerced. So all the poems in each of those sections kind of follow the theme of it's cursed, coerced, combative and corrupted. And in this section, coerced, it's a fairly light-hearted poem, a poem about how I can never remember anyone's name, and this is something that did actually happen, and it's called Jan, Jen or Jean. I hadn't seen her in years. Her name was Jan, Jen or Jean. I couldn't remember which. My face lit up like a fruit machine when she caught my glance as we passed each other on Southwark Bridge. "Hi, Tom," she said, and as if she pressed play, I felt compelled to take the chance. The names began to spin inside my head. Jan, Jen, Jean. I pressed stop too quickly. I had little choice and settled on Jean. "Hi, Jean," I said. We passed. I pressed collect and got a sick feeling in my gut as the name Jan for first prize flashed before my eyes. Yes, anyway, so the next section is combative, and the poem I'm going to read from that section is a poem called Shopping with Perseus. And it is about my first ever solo shopping trip to Oxford Street when I was a teenager. And because that's not really that exciting, I've added some monsters into the mix just to liven it up a bit. So this is the poem. It's called Shopping with Perseus. The night before I made my first daunting solo shopping trip to Oxford Street, Perseus appeared in the dark at the end of my bed. He gave me such a fright, but it was uncanny. His tunic, sandals, curly hair and ruggedness were exactly as depicted in the book I studied that day in school. He ordered me to sit up and listen carefully, for he was here, he said, to warn me about a new type of gorgon, the fashion victim, which lurked in every clothing store on Oxford Street. The fashion victim is hideous. Don't look directly at one. Anyone who gazes into an undiscerning eye gets turned to plastic. You must believe it. Where did you think those showroom dummies come from? I was stunned by this revelation, and Perseus, seeing he had my full attention, continued. Fashion victims can be recognised by their permanently bulging eyes caused by ridiculous prices on labels and the multicoloured dreads which are actually snakes. With that, I immediately knew that what he thought were gorgons were simply people copying the glamour grebo style of the Kill Kids, whose latest and biggest hit was Snake Eyes, and Perseus, having obviously seen the video in which their multicoloured dreads turn into snakes, had mistakenly thought that what was simply fashion was a matter of life and death. Your mission is to enter their lair. Their lair? It's called Topshop. Locate and buy one pair of winged sandals, make sure they're the red ones, and then straight away get out of there. I would go myself, but I am 3,000 years old, far too old to get served in a place like that. But you are young. Your lack of fashion sense has rendered you invisible. There are mirrors everywhere to guide you, and your teenage habit of gazing at your shoes and never looking into people's eyes when they talk to you nor you to them will hold you in good stead when dealing with these creatures. So go forth and get me the winged sandals in red. Well, I knew even then that I wouldn't be able to find what he was looking for, and the gorgons weren't actually gorgons. But not wanting to make a 3,000-year-old man feel bad, I decided the following night, when Perseus came to see me again to ask me how my shopping trip had gone, to make up a story. I told him I went into Topshop as instructed, and onwards up to Topman, and when he asked did the gorgons appear, I said no, as word had spread that a fearless human protected by Perseus and the goddess Athena was on his way, and they'd all be killed if they stuck around. But unfortunately, before the gorgons fled, they destroyed all the stock in the winged sandals section, and that's why I couldn't get my hands on a pair. Perseus, though crestfallen, thankfully seemed to buy my story. He said, don't worry about it. Then asked me for one more favour. Could I next week go instead to Gap and get him a cap of invisibility? Thank you again. Okay, so that's that was from that section. And then the last section, Corrupted, I'm going to read a poem that was originally published in Poems for the NHS at 70. That was an anthology published by the Onslaught Press, and it's a kind of ever so slightly satirical poem, and it's called it's just called this. The surgery I go to has a two-headed doctor, which kind of says it all really, and this is the poem. The surgery I go to has a two-headed doctor. Dr. Smith will see you now. It gets very confusing. Dr. Smith via his left head gives me a diagnosis, then via his right head gives me a second opinion, which always differs from the first, and that opinion is never the best one, always the worst. When Dr. Smith examines me with a stethoscope, it's in the left head's left ear and the right head's right ear. In other words, he makes a right pig's ear and also a left pig's ear of any examination he does. However, when I once challenged him about it, Dr. Smith's left head simply said, "Can you breathe in a bit more deeply, please?" while his right head shook morosely. Apparently his wife has two heads as well, and two pairs of breasts. It's said they met as impoverished but physically normal students, earning money by undergoing laboratory tests. Two heads are better than one, they say, but I'm not too sure that comes into play while attending an appointment with the always in two minds Dr. Smith.
Hi, my name's Kat Walker, and today I'm going to be reading to you from my debut novel The Scoop, which was published by Red Door Books on the 19th of March, just at the beginning of this isolation lockdown. March 2006. When I was little, I used to go on adventures all the time. I'd pack an apple, my penknife, a spare jumper and a compass into my brown school satchel, and Mum or Dad would find me tramping determinedly up into the woods behind our house. 30 years on, and the woods have been uprooted to make way for a new housing development. My adventuring days are long gone, and my compass is well and truly broken. Outside the thick glass window, London's skyline is struggling to make itself visible behind a misty veil of drizzle. I'm meant to be filing some really not very important paperwork, just in case of an unimaginable future need to look at it again. I stand up, briskly picking up the sheaf of papers to dispatch them to their retirement home. After all, this is my job, and if I don't do it, well... Looking around the office at the nodding tops of people's heads behind their computer monitors, I'm suddenly struck by a frightening existential thought. I sit back down at my desk, blindsided by the sheer inconsequentiality of my own existence. God, I hate my job. Almost without my noticing, the papers slip out of my hand into the waste paper bin at my feet. I stare at them for a moment, and then calmly take the big wad of files from my in-tray and post them into the bin too. It feels very satisfying, as if I finally understood the filing system. I open my desk drawer, pulling it out beyond its wooden runners until it's free, and empty its contents in one fell swoop. I feel almost delirious. Next, I position the bin at one end of my desk, and with one long sweep of my arm, send my whole collection of pens, pencils, notebooks, business cards, gonks, stress toys, floppy disks, motivational flashcards, and amusing vegetable-shaped pencil sharpeners into its waiting jaws. I stand up, suddenly light-headed, surveying my empty desk. Now what? I contemplate standing on it and yelling, "Who's coming with me?" like Jerry Maguire in that film. But I suspect I'd get the same response. Just the fish. I don't even have a fish. So I just walk brazenly past my boss, past the rest of the team who never notice me, past the group of life-size cardboard cutouts of our charity patron, a scruffy but very rich musician from a defunct 80s band. Pausing at the door, I take one last look around the office. Nobody has even noticed I'm going. I take a couple of steps back and punch the nearest cutout smack in the face. "Shove your no-good, goody-two-shoes, bloody charity, bloody job," I yell inwardly, adding out loud for our patron's benefit, "You'll need your own bloody band-aid when I'm finished with you." The cutout makes a muffled puff sound and sways gently on its weighted stand, grinning silently. Smug git. I flounce out of the office, slamming the door, which closes slowly and quietly behind me on its mechanism. What do I care? Freedom starts right now, I think to myself as I reach the street. Life starts right now. A month later, and I'm sitting in the dilapidated cafe at Trowell Motorway Service Station in the rainy north of England on a wet and windy Saturday afternoon in the middle of April. It seems a pretty inauspicious place to start an adventure. I've just dropped off my cat, Dixon, with my parents, and I've arranged to meet Danny here. Danny, who says he has a surprise for me. Danny probably thinks I'm having a midlife crisis, ringing him up pretty much out of the blue and asking him to meet me here. To be fair, I most probably am having a midlife crisis. Let's face it, I'm in my mid-30s, I have an unused history and classics degree, no career prospects, I don't own my own home, I haven't had a relationship since She Who Must Not Be Named several years ago, and I have a cat instead of children. But most of all, I have a nagging little voice in my head. Well, more like a loud, shouty thing with cymbals and a megaphone, telling me that there must be more to life than this, surely. The last 4 weeks since I walked out of the office have been less than underwhelming. It should have been the glorious start of the rest of my life, an epic adventure. And indeed it was for a couple of days. Pure freedom. I felt like I could do anything I wanted.
and ended up doing absolutely nothing but sitting around in my pyjamas, watching daytime TV and eating pot noodles, planning my future in between episodes of Midsummer Murders. Then on the third day, HR rang from the office and asked why I hadn't been in. When I explained, they told me in no uncertain terms that if I didn't come back and work out my notice, then they'd sue me for breach of contract. So I had to slink back in, past that sly, grinning cardboard git, back to my denuded desk. I filed and photocopied and fetched coffee for another 3 long, miserable and mortifying weeks. And as if that wasn't humiliation enough, I then had to endure a stilted leaving do, where nobody really talked to me except an enthusiastic new intern who seemed to think that the free sandwiches and plastic cups of cheap, warm white wine might presage a visit from our celebrity patron himself, as if. Before anyone could boozily suggest a speech of some sort, I slunk out of the office as politely as I could, this time with my tail firmly between my legs. And as I walked unsteadily down the street, I barely registered the black limo pulling up behind me, with a trendily scruffy guy in the back who bore a strong resemblance to a cardboard cutout I once knew. So here I am, halfway up the M1 at Trowel Services in the pouring rain, in a cafe that smells like a greasy hospital, eating a sandwich that cost me a day's wages and tastes like week-old cardboard breakfast cereal, waiting for Danny, who's late again. Danny, who spent his whole life being late. Late for class, late home, late for work, late to settle down. In fact, the only thing Danny was ever early for was puberty, which arrived like Concord when he was 12 years old, giving him wings and pumping him so full of hormones he practically exploded. And he's been like that ever since. Which is why I'm worried that this surprise will be yet another unsuitable blonde bombshell with legs up to her ears, who's going to ruin everything. Not that I'm jealous as such, well, not in a conventional way. My thoughts trail away as Danny appears at the top of the escalator, water dripping down his handsome face as he folds his collar down. "Hey, gay girl, how's life on the other side of the sheets?" He strides up to me and gives me one of his huge bear hugs, which I hide in, hoping that by the time I emerge, everyone will have gone back to their own lives, satisfied at the semblance of normality restored by the big macho man hug, even if that funny-looking woman does look a bit like a boy. His leather jacket smells reassuringly familiar, even if his aftershave is a bit overpoweringly masculine. And it's while hugging Danny, and feeling no particular desire for him to let go, that I begin to wonder where his passengers got to. Straining to see over his shoulder, I can see no lost-looking blonde waiting for the big man to notice her again. In fact, I can't see anyone standing nearby except a lost boy, a slightly bedraggled elfin-looking child of indeterminate age in a scruffy black hoodie, who's standing there and staring at me with a kind of inner fury directed against all adults. I ignore him, still scanning the area for the blonde. "So where's your surprise?" I manage to gasp as Danny finally lets go with one last squeeze. "Huh? Oh, right." Danny looks round and seizes the scruffy little hoodie by the shoulder and drags its contents into an uncomfortable side embrace. "Casey, meet Harry." The boy turns and sneers at me with all the grace of Vinnie Jones on a bad day. What? I'm too stupefied to say anything more intelligent. What? Who? Why? I manage to pop out some elementary questions at the same time as my brain is wandering through all the possible explanations. Nephew? Kid next door on his way to football practice? Friend's son being looked after for the day by caring father figure? What, Danny? Yeah, right. Think again. Meanwhile, the mini-street version of Legolas is looking distinctly unimpressed by my stammering. So I address him directly. "Hi, Harry." It's Harry. "Well, I think you'll find that we pronounce the H in Harry," I correct him, and in return I receive a long, hard stare which Paddington Bear would be extremely proud of. Actually, it's Harry, with an A, short for Aristotle, Danny interjects helpfully with a grin. Are you kidding me? I turn Danny slightly away from the child. Aristotle? What kind of person names their kid Aristotle? I blurt out to him, oblivious as I am that all children have super sensitive hearing when it comes to adult conversations they're not meant to hear. The intelligent kind, Ari spits out and walks off, leaving hanging in the air the unspoken and momentarily accurate implication that I am not the intelligent kind. I shrug at Danny in disbelief. Aristotle, you know, the Greek philosopher. Casey, you did classics. Oh, that Aristotle. I manage a weakly ironic smile at Danny's improbable declaration. Well, of course. But tell me, Danny, who is he and what's he doing here? Well, Danny shrugs a trademark shrug. That's kind of a long story.
Everyone, I'm Julian Turner, a poet who lives in Otley, West Yorkshire, and I'm really pleased to be able to read to you today. I'm going to read one poem from each of my 4 collections. First one is from Crossing the Outskirts, published in 2002. Chiron, your hand bones click with each thick stroke against the muscles of the tide. Your empty face is turned aside and hooded by a sackcloth cloak. The skiff is coked with creosote, which peels up like tiny hands. The duckboards where your Tarsus stands are knuckle deep in grease. The boat is rocking now against the quay, grey as the dawn which is no dawn. You stand aside to let me on. What is it that you want with me? No answer. Just these present threats. Of course I want to run, but can't. The steps go nowhere. I feel faint. Strangely, I'm out of cigarettes. The lip of earth on my toe cap is all I'll take to disembark into the unforgiving dark. Heart in my mouth, unready, I step onto the sticks, into your sway. I recognise your flinch from me, that instinct of proximity. I watch you row the world away. Out on the slow reach, nothing stirs. The oars leave hints of whirlpools in the sluggish tide like dimpled skin. The water hangs from them as hairs of long dead bodies which have crossed. These are the last tears I will cry. They wash away my face and sigh in the cold sea like something lost. There is no coming back to shore. Across the river, children play by chestnut trees. We edge away. I think I should have loved you more. And the second poem is made in the event of my writing a will for myself, and it's called Repulsion. The mind shies away from it, a reflex like the way 2 pieces of magnetic chess pressed base to base flip round and stand apart. Anathema, it stops you in its tracks. As you labour on the details of your will, pausing over interment or cremation. The cold constriction of eternity boxed up beneath 400 weight of soil. Your skin blisters, your organs liquefy, a purge of putrefying froth leaks from all orifices, every feature lost as your face swells to bursting and your eyes spring out. Your brain begins to drizzle down your cheeks. Your sternum ruptures from the force of methane and ammonia, swollen like some absurd and slush-filled flesh balloon. Or else, on rollers, as the curtains shut, and just before the piped hymn winds its bars of I will fear no evil, the gas jets roar at 1700 degrees Fahrenheit, and you put on a light show for yourself as your salts go up and your flesh is melted off your bones. Your bones are burned from white to black and back to white again, their powder proof of your fragility, as, lastly, all affinity between your parts breaks down and you are sieved as ash. A pause so long both options pass before your sorry soul. Rather, strap me out above the moors in a sky burial, my eyes eaten by jackdaws, the great rock of the Chevin at my back ticking as my world's goods are unpacked. Third poem is one I wrote about my father, I suppose an imagined version of my father, who used to take me to archaeological sites, just ones in the middle of nowhere where no one was digging or anything, and where he'd look for now largely Roman remains, but other stuff too. So this is one is from Planet Struck, the third collection. At the pagan sites, my father showed me how to haunt such sites. He disappeared as I walked after him, returned to me as one small speck within the larger field, wearing the clothes of sky. His wet shirt flapping scarecrow-like, a kind of corpusant appearing to illume the flake white of his cheeks, as if he came back from a lonely lake on the far shores. And in between the time he disappeared and he returned, beside some nameless mound I'd wait and watch the dark grow in the east, a high wind fill the distant copse, or pick among the scraps and fence left in the ditch for old time's cloth of gold and muddy gems. Rustlings would follow him like after steps. They followed us when he would take a hold of my hand as silently he walked me back to the thoughtless world of ordinary things. We all spend some time there. I get away as much as possible. I drive at dusk to wait alone, where lane ends swing the lead. A poem about a trip to a Hebridean island, uninhabited, called Mingulay. Managed to persuade a fisherman to take a group of us over there in the 1990s. Yes, so this is the final poem called Mingulay. It's from Desolate Market, the most recent collection from Carcanet. Mingulay, immense and blank and close enough to touch, their bed on bed of metamorphic rock, glistening black and veined with red feldspar. The 200-metre cliffs of Mingulay rise and fall with each swell of 20 foot as we drift between the island and the stack, where elements contend and play their game of scissors, paper, stone. Sea eats out rock, rocks cut the wind, and wind frenzies the sea. Now the cliffs appear to be plate glass. They glide sheer into the green immensity, bow at the base as if they slowly flow back into a molten magma sea. Right now, they mirror the salt cloud of the sky, the breathing ocean and the boat's paintwork, lending us the anonymity of rock. We tack out of the lee onto a high sea, heading for Barra, tilting through 90 degrees. We do not recognise ourselves ashore, much changed since this morning. We clasp tea in our grateful hands, the cafe listing dangerously. We are still out there with the sharks, dwarfed by the buckled ramparts, banded gneiss, the oldest rocks which melt in front of us. Later, long since birthed on land, our spirits tug against the moorings of our bodies, hear the gannets call us as they pass. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure reading to you.
Hello, so my name's Frankie, I'm 21 years old, so a little bit about myself first. I am a third year English literature and creative writing student at Lancaster University, but unfortunately because of all that's going on I'm actually self-isolating at home with my family in Dorset at the moment. So it's been a really anticlimactic end to uni and to my degree, and I definitely miss sharing my poetry in sort of the campus events. So this really for me is the perfect opportunity to connect with other people, and I hope that you guys enjoy my poems. So the first one I've got here is called Seasonal Affective Disorder. I mourn the invitations I have lost to watch the sunrise wake before the world. Dawn scatters golden corn across the sky, her arms outstretched, each ray its own poem. But something stole the blanket in the night to weigh it down. The ribs between the blinds of anorexic light are not enough to wake me from my dream of a divorce from forces pressing on my eyes like pins. That same force welds hot bedsheets to my skin, a chrysalis that I no longer need. I think of all the empty notebook lines whose words beamed from the sky 3 hours ago. Instead, 5, 6, 7 alarms scream. We've slept past 10 again. My phone is limp with no new messages. The light outside is colourless. The birdsong chatter grates like builders on the roof, enjoying lunch. In cling film sheets, the flesh around my heart is turning stale. A recent study shows that 10% of 21-year-olds are 30 times more likely. The screen blinks. My signal to the mothership is lost. The static clouds spit figures in the fog. My eyelids swim in plasma when they're closed. Their neon circles pulse and ache and swear that next time they will wake to find the sun. Okay, so that was the first one. The second one I've got here is called Sermon, which, surprise, surprise, I wrote in a church. Let us pray. We plant these pews back in the soil and water them with the tears of our children. Let us pray. The radiators spill the oceans in a black paste across the floor. Let us pray. The sun falls from the sky, slits it like a jugular, dispelling air we don't deserve. Let us pray. These stones crumble like Parliament till all we hold dear is scattered ash in the sky. Let us pray that all the gold in Exodus falls from the ceiling and crushes our false idols. Let us pray that one cough from the pulpit sickens our race and the font dries up and the pillars catch fire and the ghosts of our ancestors squeeze through stained glass with their colourful hope. Let us pray for a church without prayer, where we do not wait on you, Lord, to stop the world from burning. This one, it's called Home for Christmas, and I apologise because it isn't Christmas, I know. Banbury, Oxford, Reading. Each station a dreary door of Advent. Same taste, different mould. This year's 12 strains of flu hide behind sullen scarves, breed dust on the platform posters. The train scrapes the track, whining like that child in every carriage. Basingstoke, Winchester. For 5 hours I've sighed with the frost, watched Christmas run its clockwork course. Cities wrapped with ribbons of road, drowsy lights like dying bees. Hills swoon across the horizon, where pylons drape grey tinsel across a silver sky. Airport Parkway, Southampton. The snow is home for Christmas to spit on the hills, the homeless, to throttle foxes in their holes. It dapples the tracks, weeping on suitcases as the train brakes screech home, that heavy name like a breath of myrrh. Now arriving in Bournemouth. Okay, let's read this one. This is called A Sonnet on Two Coastlines. Surprise, surprise, it's a sonnet. I really find the topic of north-south divide very interesting to write about as a southerner sort of in the north, well, not in the north at the moment, an adopted northerner, if you will. My car sighed to a halt atop the cliffs. The Isle of Wight, a distant wisdom tooth that ached like notebook lines upon my wrists. I rolled my sleeves to let them breathe the truth. The Channel salivated as we kissed, its sandy gums eroding with my youth. Each slingshot, Cupid moon led waves of bliss to tempt me, stay. These mountains are the mouth which traps the mud-bound tongue of Morecambe Bay. Redundant are the rails that cage the tide. I sigh into the metal and confess, on notebook scars, salt stinging their decay. I wish I'd listened when the seagulls cried, choose carefully the land you dispossess. So the next poem I've got is about a sort of beauty spot, sort of park that I used to write in my teen years, which has now become very heavily industrialised, which is quite sad. It's called Hatch Pond. I came here to say, you haven't changed at all, to breathe that lie across the bronze water casually as the wind stirs you like it's evening tea. But you used to be blue, back when I spent Sundays playing snakes and ladders on maps until I stumbled upon you. I came here to say, I miss the times we spent, to the egrets and ducks that have bred and died and bred again, vowels of alarm rising like the steam around your edges. I'd lay in your lap, rest my pen in your ridges as sunsets bobbed beside me like lily pads. I came here to say, you saved me. The life ring, once a silent promise, is an open red mouth, spewing a pulp of algae across the pontoon. I'd lie my notebook down between the reeds there as they conjured scenes with gentle, magic claps of their fingers. I came here to say, thank you for the times the birdsong spilling from the oak tree's arms were the only kind sounds I'd hear all day. But I've never noticed the new bench next to its stump, orange and unsightly, like the floating crisp packets. I came here to say, you are so beautiful, as a lighter flare winks at me from across the park. The stench of hemp wraps around my lungs like the diesel fumes from the construction site that's coming for you next, blackening the sky.
This is a piece titled Leads the Great and Grey. Buildings of blue and brown, made of glass and of stronger stuff. There's a road that winds its way around, circling like the mythical Ouroboros, snaking its way, protecting its hoard of the wool and the coal that the north is built of stony men bent in agony like Louisa does my nails. She's getting married this year, but it will not be a church wedding because we are past such things. But the cathedral still stands, awed and treasured, like lost letters of love my grandmother keeps in the dresser of her room, that she shares with my grandfather, who tells the same stories of their house in Dewsbury, back when they owned a house. No one in my family owns a house, because we are past such things. 11 houses for 11 birthdays. I grew up in moving boxes, feeling at home whenever the soft twang of a Yorkshire dialect chirps. Tell me it's a bap, call me love, not because I am your lover, but because I have a sweet smile, like Louisa does my nails. All roads lead to Leeds, through York and through Middlesbrough. Though now it's a thoroughway, a notice board, a passage to London, the M1 shining like a beacon, for the men in suits and the girls with green hair painting in their bedrooms, dreaming of bigger things, I shall rest my weary head in my temporary bed, or the room I make for myself at home, for just one more year in the friendly faces of Hyde Park and the homeless beggars of Woodhouse Moor, who will never escape the Ring Road. This piece called Halfway House. When my body was a place for my soul to rest in, I told myself it was my right to dress it up however I felt fit, to carve and saw and mould it to reflect my inner sense of self I had carefully crafted over time. Surely the exterior should be beautiful. When I wasn't connected to the flesh and bone, I allowed it to swell and I allowed it to wilt under the violence of my own actions. When my body was a temple, I rubbed cocoa butter into my skin till I was soft and supple, a walking monument to self-care, smelling of vanilla and sandalwood. I told myself that lightning bolts on my thigh were testament to all I've been through. When my body was a home, I listened to what it needed. I ate till I was full and practiced yoga as the sun rose. When I was angry, I cut my hair. When I felt lonely, I allowed others to find their homes within it. When I offered my body to you, it was a last chance reduced rack bargain bin sale item. It had been worn and weathered and broken apart. You took my body in, fully aware of the fact I was used goods. With niff fingers, you stitched me back together. You allowed me to become something new once more. With every patch job, I became more of myself. Threads that were once loose, bound into one. There were places I could never be fixed. Rips you allowed to shine like intentional choices, making my dark days pale in comparison to the life that was ahead. My body was rebuilt. From the foundations to each individual roof tile, this time we used cement, solid brick. I would not be blown away by the big bad wolf. And from your example, I allowed others to join in. It had colourful additions to my washed-out exterior. When they touched my skin, it flushed, coming alight. Possession. Too few moments, so little time. Sparse chance to find out all I found myself craving. I want to know the reason you flinch when you hear loud noises. I found myself going over everything I know and have yet to know. Sunshine trickles, fitful terror. It's now the time. Tell me how it felt when you lost him. That man that was your all. Tell me why you cannot get your mind off him. Do you wish to trade places in the time when things are dark? When everything's dark for you, let me into the encroaching pitch. How do I ask that? The tension taut, I'll cut through it, reach out towards you, hold your slender wrists and wonder, how can you not love all that you are? Mere weeks I have fallen, dove into the deep end, surrounded myself by your arms. You pulled me closer in the night. Nothing ever felt as solemn as my return to the covers after you have left, but now you stay. I cannot comprehend a universe in which there is a me and a you that have not heard each other gasp. Tender caress, let me discover you. I have never claimed to be someone who could fix you, but I want to fill notebooks with the constellations on your skin, documenting every scraped knee. You're a galaxy I want to explore, but somehow my telescope feels meagre. Have you ever tried? Tell me about your song you relate to the most. The one your 13-year-old self carefully copied out in the pages of his maths books, calculating dosages, seeking a high or at least an escape from the low, losses compounded. When did you decide you can no longer remove yourself from the world? Do you ever dream about growing roots? Sinking deep into your street, arm in arm, branch with the bike thief, ominous moonlight, extremities cold. Allow me to open my chest and take your hand inside. I'll plunge them deep between my lungs if it would make you comfortable. How does one accomplish such a feat? Holding me at a distance, within the crowd, listening to my truth. I don't think I've ever seen a more honest version of the boy who intrudes upon every page I write. What did you think when you heard the versions of you I'd captured in time, in the snippets of verse? Were the reflections of versions of you recognised, or I had crafted within you the reverberations I was sending out? You see, I'm trying to get to know you. Because the immensity of the emotion rolls over me, threatening to leave me flat, requires reason. It terrifies me that one day you may have comprehended removing yourself from my narrative, a woman of no real significance. If my role is not to love you, it is to reintroduce you again to romance without fear. Tell me how it felt when she broke your heart. Walk me through the moments you decided you were willing for it to be broken again. Have I told you the way my breath becomes baited when you roll over in the night, and then the memories of turned backs come flooding back? But will you deflate the panic when you pulled my arm around you, legs intertwined, bodies tousled beneath the sheets, the one place I used to believe you knew me best, for I cannot hide anything, naked as I am. Allow me to trace the ink on your skin. Feel the memories protrude like your hip bones do, pressed against my plump, the irony of my worry, when I am pleading to waste away. The question hovers in the air. I can feel its skeleton hands sliding their way around my throat. It died the moment I became too scared to ask you. I want all that you are. Even if it takes me decades to discover it, to chart all the courses this could take, I will adventure down every one with you, because thus far it seems as if every hour with you is an eternity and a blink. And the nights without you stretch out further than the distance from my bed to yours. Muffled conversation, melancholic rain. Can we just take a Tuesday and talk? This piece is about the same relationship, but at a bit of a more complicated time. It's called Pause. We press pause over and over. When things get tough, when we get scared, when we are separated, going so far just to stop. And each time one of us reaches out, fumbling in the mud that constitutes us these days. Playing out in my mind, we never resembled the screen. No meet, cute, odd couple, picture-perfect, dramatic reconciliation. We were slow burn. Falling despite, not because of it. You press pause, scared by the velocity of the fall. You love the poems I write, finding solace in the soft tone of my voice, basking in the words I write about you, in the nights you claim me mine. But how can I be yours when I'm slowly wearing a VHS tape as you pause, play, rewind? I've never tried to fast forward through the clumsy beginnings. You press pause, I push back. You press pause, I reached out. You pressed pause because I pressed pause, believing you could never be mine, thinking I was pressing stop. I saw myself as a second in a montage, a face in the crowd, an extra in the part of your life just before you met her. I pressed stop, but we found our way back. In the comfort of your voice I found my own, but you pressed pause, and I have never felt more alone than in the absence of you. This piece is about platform 15B in Leeds Central train station, where I was stood as I was having a breakdown. Turns out that being in a train station when you're coping with compulsive thoughts is not the best place to be. Because all I can think about is when I was younger, the tracks looked a lot deeper. Like if I dropped in, I wouldn't be able to get myself back up, which was always really stopping me because I never liked getting in trouble. But now I'm a woman of little fear. I look death in the eye and greet it like a disgruntled lover. I wish I was made of stronger stuff, more durable than mere flesh, but my constitution is weak. And I'm thinking about my brain and how it looks splattered on that wall. It is morbid, I am told, to have these thoughts. But I am a morbid woman, one who deals with death on the daily and swallows medication prescribed for those with hysteria. My womanly traits turned against me. My anxious thoughts always running late, like the train I am taking home, because I can no longer be trusted on my own. They chase to catch me, faltered by their own inability to realise their faults, that they were more echoes of the terror I am defeating ever I wake. The nightmare will not follow me forever, I'm sure of that. When I am stood waiting for the red car central on platform 15B, there is nothing I can do but dream into my jump into that pit and the aftermath. This piece is called Sweet. The day is written on the page of a notebook. Another donut because of the negative, the whole is the negative, the cake is always a wedge, a chunk, a plus to the daily total, I add and I tot, sweet treats I allow myself, plaguing my mind through the day until I can stuff, shovel, savour, licking icing off of sticky fingers. Waffles for breakfast, pastries for lunch, I'll skip dinner to eat chocolate tonight, I've never had a problem. Lovers tell me I taste of honey, that I'm a treat they cannot deny themselves. There's only so much sweetness one can take. One more I allow, once more I tempt fate. Once I am nauseous, we will empty and begin again. A packet of bonbons, 824, my body's a pinball machine, I am playing the game.
I'm a wild swimmer. Just as our country was going into lockdown, I posted a photograph of Crummock Water in the Lake District on the Outdoor Swimming Society Facebook page, and I asked other swimmers to tell me what colours they saw as they swam into the photograph. I got about 50 comments, fantastic descriptive language, and I offered to write a story inspired by their words, because for many of us, water provides a huge amount of solace, and it gives us a lifeline, mentally, physically, emotionally. And during this particular time of difficulty and fear and loss, I hope that this story will inspire swimmers and non-swimmers to find some sort of refuge within the words. The Lost Hour. Saoirse curled up under the green-blue, gold-grey duvet, recoiling from the stiff breeze that whipped up blue moods and salty white Atlantic sprays to batter the old panes of her cottage just above the beach. No one to snuggle up beside any more, since her beloved Connor had sailed away across the oil-ink water from their together life last blue sky summer, taking with him the promise of dancing reflections on the teasing waves. Some days she stayed in bed, her blank mind as empty as this lump of home granite only accessible by boat. Her heart dragged so slow she hoped it would just stop and this could be done with. But today was special. The clocks went forward. Time had stolen an hour of her life. Family tradition, going back generations, meant that she had to do something to regain that hour. In years past, she'd written a poem, baked a cake, run round the island naked, sped read a book, skipped, made love, danced around a bonfire. 60 minutes of lost time, grabbed and lived down to the last second.
There was no escape either. Her father and sister, who lived on the mainland, would be calling her later on Skype, full of how they'd spent their 60 minutes. Saoirse sighed, not feeling a single inch like the luminous goddess of the water Connor had captured in a black and white photograph that hung to the left of the window. She stared at the 50 shades of faded smoky grey in the photograph, the inky water, the patent leather kelp-strewn shore, the unismon-like rocks, the moody sky, her iridescent limbs. The waves hypnotised her even now, and the clouds brooding and slowly falling from the hills until they were kissing the edge of the water echoed her own sense of loss. "Do it, Saoirse," she urged herself, flinging back the duvet and wincing as her bare feet touched the cold gunmetal grey-painted floorboards. "This is what we need." "We? Damn you, Connor!" She grabbed her yellow and white cotton robe from the hook on the back of the bedroom door and fastened the tie around her waist angrily. She had 60 minutes from the moment she pressed start on her phone, plenty of time to gather what she needed from the boot room come tiny kitchen. White and yellow. White for the blank page that was her mind. Yellow splashes for the joy from the salty water and for the spring sun tickling the daffodils sheltering behind the stone wall. The kettle boiled and she filled her thermos, watching as the chai tea bag floated like a soggy leaf to the surface. Squashing it down quickly, then flicking it out, she turned her attention to her feet and body. Thick socks, oversized boots and capacious coat, topped off with a charcoal bobble hat. Ready. 10 precious minutes recaptured. Outside the cottage, she hesitated. It was steely cold. The pewter sea did not entice her any closer. It was leaden, dark, dense. Where were the silvery, silky hues that reminded her of happiness and love? Wrapping her arms around her body just made her feel more lonely. 5 minutes spent wallowing. Disappointed with herself, she marched across the scrubby grass in front of the cottage, pulled open the creaky wooden gate and started to run down the sandy path towards the beach. White stones, placed either side of the path, guided her the 500 metres or so, each carefully painted by Connor and decorated with a motif in navy blue. A seahorse, a shell, a piece of seaweed, a fish. They'd taken weeks to create, and now greeted her like silver stepping stones, leading to a glorious sunny future. A quick glance at her phone. Only 40 minutes left. Stepping across the khaki shore, she held her hand up to shield her eyes from the bright light and golden sunbeams, which were now dancing around on the surface of the water. The darker shades of blue and green gave way to edges of black, a shiny black water, which would have been terrifying if she had never swum there before. She knew how she would feel and move. With one breath, she would be able to see bold shades of sky blue, dark green, white and brown. And then, with her head down, there would be beautiful, translucent shades of green and grey. No swimming today, though. Mist, clouds, fog, rain, wind, all are good in their own way. But she felt too cold inside to take on the challenge, even though with squinted eyes she could see the guiding light pulling her into the water, showing her a silky blue silver path to swim down. Perched on a rock close to the furthest reach of the waves, she pulled off her boots and socks, wriggling her toes in the cold, honeycombed sand. Behind her lay rock pools, some deeper than others. Today, this would be her solace. Bronze, more like the peaty waters of Dartmoor than the recessive blues of her ocean. Naked under her heavy coat, she shivered in excitement and anticipation. Her long hair hung like liquid gold down her back as she stepped out of human trappings to dance with the Naples yellow sea lichen and wavy fronds of kelp. A final 20-minute sense of escape invaded her entire body. Like a glittering colour of poetry overwhelms a struggling writer. White wisps flitted across mauve clouds as crab-like she immersed herself slowly into her rock pool memory. I love seeing the light on the water and the pale yellow making a sunpath across the dark green. Bliss, she told her father and sister later. I filled my lost hour with silver and a beautifully muted burst of gold.
She was the kind who didn't seem to mind the brown crusts of bread, or the way that the raindrops were guaranteed to fall from sodden trees as they hung in the breeze over her head. They're like little blessings that water my thoughts, she'd once said. You see, her heart was lighter than those of her counterparts. She was a pacifist fighter with harmony across all parts, and she floated through life on a cloud of Chanel number 22. If she was a number, she'd be 222. Consistent and even and just more than full. Just more than 100%. Sunshine seemed to follow her wherever she went. To her, life always seemed plenty. Flowers grew all year round and the glass was never half empty, except when the bottle was full. And she had this bloom that pollinated the flowers of others' greyer days. And in many ways, it's not that she was always positive, just that she was never negative, never used the pejorative, and always found it in her heart to give some of what she had to those who really needed it. And this rose-tinted outlook that made everything look so good gave her energy enough so that the surplus leaked out through her feet, letting flowers grow beneath. And when she opened her mouth to speak, her words were like leaves falling. Perhaps she was so right because she always went all in, never doing things by half. You can't stop her now, she's soaring. To her, nothing in life could ever be boring. She was like a child on a lulled sugar high. It would be a lie to say that she was always happy. It's just that even through her pain and her heartbreak, she always held the key, always had her hand on the brake, so that she'd be in control of which road she chose to take. Thank you.